Hi, everybody. We are kind of casual because it's Saturday. We will get a little bit more formal, but maybe a little bit more rambunctious too. We'll find out. So I'm Michael Munson with Forge, and I am excited to have a different kind of programming today than we've been doing lately. So we're kind of looking at some history and having some storytelling, which is really going to be a fun adventure for us. So thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us. I'm especially grateful for our ASL interpreter, who I know would rather be outside instead of inside with us. But let's get rolling. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping for folks. I know that a lot of us are really familiar with Zoom by now because that is our life on Zoom. But we do have captioning, as many of you might see already. So if you'd like to see the captions, you can click on the little CC button at the bottom of your screen and have different size captions if you'd like to see them. We have ASL. If you'd like to pin the ASL person, you can pin Jill by going up to those three dots at the top of her picture and then clicking pin so that you can always see her if that is important or needed for you. Everybody right now is in listen only mode, so that means that you can see the folks that are on the screen right now and that the other folks that are attending basically are listening and not going to be able to be on camera. And we may change that later if we want to have more of a discussion. So the way that you can interact with us is to use the chat feature. And why don't we practice that by having folks find the chat, which I know some of you have found already. And how about answering the question about when you think of the 1970s, and trans folks or trans communities, what's the one word or couple of words that come to mind? So when you think about the 1970s and trans folks, what comes to mind? Dark ages. Okay. Hidden. Mm-hmm. A history in the making. Scared, lonely. Mm-hmm.
Yep, it was.
Yep. Yep. All of those things. Yep. Cool. We will end up talking, I think, about some of those hidden things. I think the only other thing that I'd like to add before we get started officially is that we are, this is part of a longer term project that was started at the beginning of COVID, and we are partnered with the Medical College of Wisconsin and the Inclusion Health Clinic, and we have a relatively small grant through the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin endowment with the Medical College of Wisconsin. So we've had the opportunity to really enhance our relationship with the Medical College of Wisconsin, which has been really beautiful and wonderful, and we've had the opportunity to do some fun things that we wouldn't normally be doing. So we are grateful for that funding. So I would like to turn things over to Loree, who's going to introduce Jen, and y'all can take it away.
Hello, I don't even know if it's good morning. Is it still morning? No, it's not even morning here. I'm Loree Cook Daniels. I go by any pronouns. Michael did not mention that we are recording this, so you should keep that in mind if you've got any sensitivities around recording. So let me introduce Jen. We're going to do this as kind of an interview format so that I have questions for her, and that'll help us just kind of shape how this discussion goes. So Genevieve Lynette Kimball has been a member of the Trans Elder Support Listserv, Elder TG, for well over a decade. And Michael pointed out that I had a different name on some of the publicity, and that's because Jen is in the middle of changing her name. So if she wants to talk about that later, she can.
Okay.
Over the years, she has shared many stories of her life on Elder TG, which has included some times and individuals who are central to the history of trans people in the United States. I thought it would be a treat to let people beyond Elder TG hear some of her stories and ask her questions about what it was like to transition in the 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area. So please welcome Jen. Jen, would you be willing to to lay some groundwork for us by telling us where you've lived in the US and where you are now, plus what some of your major jobs, some of the major jobs you've held?
I was born in Modesto, California. I've lived in Modesto, Oakdale, California, Lincoln, California. From third grade to the end of high school, I lived in Lincoln, which is about a half an hour northeast of Sacramento in the foothills of the Sierras. I lived in Davis, California. I lived in San Francisco. I lived in Santa Cruz. I lived in Santa Clara. And then there's a big jump. I spent about 6 months in Munich. And then when I came back to the States, I lived in the Burlington area, Burlington, Vermont. And now I live in St. Albans, Vermont, which is about 15 minutes south of the Quebec border. And I have been retired for 10 years. And that's where I am. As far as jobs, I've been for a short time, I was a professional artist, a painter and a printmaker. And then I was an operating engineer running heavy equipment in construction, and which I equated with doing very large scale sculpture. That was my feeling, my take on it. And then after I was injured on the job, I was retrained by the state of California into electronics, and I became a technical instructor and a field service engineer, working on equipment that was used in manufacturing computer chips. Basically optical instruments or cameras that were used in printing the computer chip, the image of the computer chip. And that was the job that I held for almost 30 years. And that was my last job before I retired.
Great, thank you. I wondered how, beyond what I just asked you, I wondered where we should start. And I decided that we should start where most trans stories start, which is when you first realized that you were trans. So can you talk a little about when you began thinking you might not be a boy?
I think there's a difference between might not be a boy, realizing I'm a girl. I knew there was something wrong as far back as I knew there was a difference between girls and boys. I mean, kindergarten and preschool, I was constantly being shuttled by the teachers. I was over playing with the girls, and they would shuttle me over to play with the boys, and I'd go back and play with my friends. No, you're supposed to be over here. No, that's not who I'm supposed to be with. So as far as when did I know? Probably as far back as I could understand the difference.
So let me ask you another one.
Okay.
One of the things that when I went through the notes, as I mentioned to people, you've written a lot of your biography to Elder TG. And as I went through them, I was really intrigued with how you handled gym class, because that's an issue that so many people have.
High school gym class. Yes.
Yes.
I had a really hard time with my body growing up. I did not like showing it to anybody. And it took me a while once I hit high school to figure out a way to avoid, we used to call it PE, okay, physical education. In high school in California, we had to change into gym clothes. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to change my clothes. I didn't want to take a shower. I didn't want to expose myself. I was quite ashamed of the body that I had. I figured out in the winter that, well, in elementary school, we had this one teacher in 7th grade who taught us how to score baseball. And I really got into that as a hobby of scoring baseball games. And I did that enough that I could qualify as an official scorer for Little League, and I could qualify as an official scorer for high school baseball. And I went to the coach and said, look, I'm an official scorer, and what else do I need to apply to be the student manager of the baseball team? You just need to show up and hand out the towels. So I would hand out the towels. I took a Red Cross course for training for how to wrap ankles and how to bandage and take care of minor bruises and stuff. And I would score, I would do statistics, I would hand out towels. I'd basically take care of the guys. And that guaranteed that I didn't have to dress for PE. I would when the uniforms came from the janitor that took care of the laundry, I would fold them and hand them back out to the players. I would do all kinds of little jobs around, just take care of the guys. And I did that in the spring. We had baseball at the high school near where I lived. We had baseball from late February all the way to June. At the beginning of the year, in the fall, from September to November was football season. And after I got my foot in the door as far as being a student manager for the baseball team, I went to the coach and said, how do I become a student manager for football? He said, you just ask me, because nobody wants to do this. So I basically did the same thing for the football team. And that got me out of most of PE. I would have about 2 or 3 weeks in the bridge between the spring baseball and the fall football. There would be a few weeks in there where I would kind of look for things to do. Some of the guys were a little rough on their uniforms. I learned to darn socks. I learned to sew patches in their uniforms and things. I wasn't very good with hand sewing, but I could do it. And it would keep me out of having to dress for PE.
Well, I was intrigued with that story. And part of the reason why I wanted to start early with it is because it gives our listeners a little bit of a heads up about your creativity and your tenaciousness.
You have to be creative about figuring out ways to do things.
Right. Yeah.
When there is no set pattern for, there's no model to follow. I mean, my model was Christine Jorgensen from the early 50s. I didn't know how she did anything.
Right.
And I was terrified to even get a book about her because my parents were very religious. I wasn't sure what their reaction would be and whether I heard stories about people being disowned, kicked out of their family. I didn't want to lose my family. I was an only kid. I was adopted when I was a week old. And I was very afraid of losing my family.
Okay. We'll get back to your family in a few minutes.
Yeah.
My next question to try and keep us on your timeline
Okay.
is, did you move to the Bay Area because the Stanford Gender Clinic was there?
No, I actually went to my ex. I was married. Should I tell the whole story? I had never I had never come out to anybody. Friends, family, nobody knew. The first person that I came out to was the woman that I ended up marrying. Her name was Rita, and Rita was a student at UC Davis. I went to visit someone else who was busy and didn't want to talk to me. She was busy studying, but I ended up with one of her roommates who wanted to talk and was quite a conversationalist. And we talked about a lot of things over the course of about 3 or 4 nights, and that we got to know each other. And then we started seeing each other on the side. And then, a surprise to both of us, we fell in love, and we were engaged for about almost 6 months, and we got married. I continued working in Davis, and Rita was a student at UC Davis, and she started investigating through the library system, the University of California library system. She started investigating gender issues and transgender and transsexual and all the different words that it's gone by over time. And eventually when she graduated, well, what do we do now? Well, you have an issue that it looks like we should probably move to the Bay Area. It was not a conscious, we want to go through the Stanford program. It was well, there are a lot of gay people, there are a lot of gender issued people. This looks like the place to go. Once we started investigating, Rita and I together, we found the Center for Special Problems. And really, the Center for Special Problems in San Francisco was probably the initial reason for our moving to San Francisco. It was, I don't even know if it still exists, but it was a part of the city's health system. The city and county of San Francisco are united. So the way there are county hospitals in some areas, there's a hospital system in San Francisco that's done by the Department of Health, and Center for Special Problems is under that health system. They are specifically designed, or were specifically designed, to deal with transgender, gay issues, sex workers, a lot of unique problems which are unique to, not necessarily to the San Francisco area, but to a very urban area like the city of San Francisco.
So where in this did your parents, coming out to your parents, happen?
It was probably the second or third thing that we did after we moved to San Francisco. After we moved to San Francisco, I transferred and continued working for the company that I had worked for in Davis, which was a division of Safeway drugs store. And after moving and establishing at Center for Special Problems, there was a storefront center that was operated in the Tenderloin for trans people, and that was basically run by an officer of the Community Relations Department, Elliot Blackstone. And after I connected with Elliot, after I connected with Center for Special Problems and started on hormones, the next basic thing was to come out to my parents and find out whether they were going to maintain the family relationship or whether they were going to kick me out. So Rita and I got this idea that we would, the only real thorough text at that time that dealt with transgender was called A Transsexual Phenomenon. It was written by Dr. Harry Benjamin, who had been one of Christine Jorgensen's doctors. And it was for that time, it was a fairly thorough book. And it's still available. By the way, it's available online for free. You have to do a little bit of hunting, but you can find it for free, and you can download it in a PDF file and read it for free. It's about 180 pages. It's pretty dry, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting. We learned a lot from that book. We got a copy of Harry's book, and we packaged it up and put a little Post-it in and said, "Mom and Dad, read this, it applies." We put this inside the book, packaged the book up, and mailed it to my parents. And we didn't contact them for 2 months. We just let them stew. I had gone through a series of crises, I guess we could call it, when I was in high school and afterwards, that I'd had to see psychiatrists several times for several long periods of time. And in high school, I had attempted suicide. Very not unusual at all for trans people. When I graduated from high school, the last time that I saw my psychiatrist, he brought my parents in and told them that he couldn't force me to come out, but he told my mom and dad that he thought that I was a gay boy, that but he couldn't force me to come out. And I would not tell him what was going on inside. I just could not open up. I was convinced that if I opened up and was honest to him, that he would hospitalize me, that he would lock me up. I was crazy. So my parents, all they thought I was gay. So when we sent them this book, they didn't know what to think. So a couple months after we sent them the book, we called them and said, "Can you come and visit us on weekdays? Give us a couple of weekdays, okay? Take a couple of vacation days and come visit us in San Francisco, and we want you to meet some people." And we took them to meet 3 people. We took them to meet the psychologist that I was working with at the Center for Special Problems, and the doctor that prescribed my hormone therapy, and Elliot Blackstone. And Dad and Mom were polite enough for the doctor and the shrink. When I took Mom and Dad in to see Elliot Blackstone, my dad had been in World War II, and all through the war, he was a supply officer for the Army Air Force. He saw this policeman saying that what I'm doing is legal, that what I'm doing is appropriate, that I am not sick, I am not crazy, I am doing what I should be doing to survive, to make life as good as I can make it. My dad just, it was like somebody threw a light switch. All of a sudden, the kids the kid's okay. The kid's doing what she's got to do to survive. And all of a sudden, my mom was more accepting to start with, but when my dad accepted, my mom had then no worries about being accepting. When I think about a year after I came out to them, I started referring to my father as Daddy. But I think the first time I said Daddy, he just kind of melted. My dad and I had a very stiff, formal relationship prior to his acceptance of me. I love my dad. He didn't like sports. He didn't even like watching sports. He didn't like anything that I liked. But he liked me. That his daughter, it was hard for me to believe how loving my parents became after I came out to them.
That is such a heartwarming story. To help people that are trying to put together the timeline, what was the year that you came out to your parents?
Rita and I were married in '69 when we were both 21. We moved to San Francisco the late winter of '71. So we were 23 when I was 20, would have been 24 when I came out to my parents, because then when I was 24 and like 24 and 3 or 4 months was when I started at Stanford. And then 2 years later, I had my surgery when I was 26.
Okay.
In September when I was 26.
Okay, so, but before we get to the surgery,
yeah,
let me ask you, at Stanford, they had a support group.
Yep.
And obviously that support group was for the trans people.
Yes.
But the staff used the support group for a very different purpose.
Yeah, to some extent they did.
Can you describe that?
The psychiatrists and the surgeons didn't sit in on our support group. They didn't actually sit there. The people who were there were staff. There was a coordinator for the group that worked for Donald. And when I say Donald Laub was the head of the Department of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. So he was the overall head of the trans section was a little subset, okay, of his total responsibilities. But he had a special relationship with us and took individual care of each person that came into the Stanford program. So it wasn't really invasive as far as the psychiatrists or the other doctors being part of the monthly meetings that we would have. The monthly meetings were really just for us and for staff. Usually just the one coordinator, but sometimes we'd have her assistant. And sometimes we would have individual parties that would be invited. Like, I think there was one of the ladies that worked at Macy's in San Francisco and did cosmetics and did makeovers. I think she came one time, and I don't even remember her name, but there were people like that would, that could help us. And it was an attempt. The monthly meetings were an attempt to help people. Now, this staff person, the coordinator for the trans group, would kind of take role and, okay, what is your status? Has anything changed in your status this month? Are you doing anything? Are you still employed? Have you changed your personal status? Have you gotten a divorce, or you got a new partner? Are you dating guys? Things like that. So they would track us to some extent, but it wasn't too invasive. Okay?
Yep. Okay. So tell me, there was another guest that was not there to help the women so much as to do something else, and he's a well-known name. So
you're talking about Truman, and boy,
Truman Capote.
This is just purely my own personal opinion from less than one full day of experience with this guy. It's not just my opinion, because we turned to each other when he left the room one time, and about 3 or 4 of us said to each other, "What is he doing in here?" Here was this really flaming gay man. What was he doing in here? He brought a friend who he thought was transgender. He brought this friend to visit the Stanford Clinic, and somehow they let him into our meeting. Our meetings were supposed to be for the patients only, not for anybody else. We were quite adamant about not wanting outside people in unless there was a reason for them to be there, like the cosmetic lady and stuff. We were not happy. Several of us went to Donald in the, I don't know whether it was a week or 2 weeks or a month or how long it was before we responded to it, but we made it known to Donald that we were not happy. This was a private space that was supposed to be for us, and we were not happy about this. I didn't think much of I didn't think much of Truman Capote.
And was his friend trans?
I didn't think so.
Okay.
Let me put it this way. If she was trans, she didn't really look like she'd ever dressed before.
Okay. Okay.
She didn't know how to carry, she didn't. She needed a lot of help.
Okay. All right. Speaking
But
of,
I have a hard time criticizing because at one point, I think it was after my parents met him, Elliot Blackstone asked me to become part of that storefront and social services unit. And I didn't want to take that on because I was employed and I was working 40 hours a week, and I didn't feel that I had the time to do it, and I couldn't choose that. I thought it needed somebody that could really dedicate their time, and I was really trying to financially support my wife was having a very hard time finding a job and keeping a job, and I was the breadwinner. I was the support for our family, and I didn't feel that I could give the kind of time that job needed.
but you did do some work with Elliot in terms of training police, right?
Oh yeah, but that was only like 2 or 3 hours, about I think 3 or 4 different times.
Okay.
3 or 4 different dates, maybe a month spaced a month apart.
Okay.
So it wasn't a lot of time, and I could get that kind of time off. But
Okay. And what kinds of things did you discuss with the police?
well, at that time, most of their interaction with transgendered was right along with their interaction with queens and with sex workers. And they didn't have any experience with someone who was changing genders, or not changing genders, but was transgendered, transsexual, whatever. They didn't have experience with them unless they were technically breaking the law. So what Elliot wanted me to do was to show them, was to give them some experience with someone who is transgendered and is legal and is employed and is working and is part of a regular culture. A part of normal everyday life. Somebody that they would not see normally, but is working and is legal, and someone that they don't have a reason to hassle, and give them sort of some experience of what my life was like.
That's great.
what was going to be easy about my life, because I was financially independent to some extent, and what was hard about my life, kind of on the edge of a cop could hassle me because I was dressing, and at one point I didn't yet have a letter where the doctor said that I was supposed to be dressed as the opposite sex. So, I mean, that was one of the real big things when I first got my letter that said that it was appropriate for me to be dressed and that I should not be hassled by the cops and stuff. That was a very, they did issue those letters, and Center for Special Problems gave me one, and then my doctor who put me on HRT gave me one, and eventually Stanford gave me one. And those letters were very valuable. I only think I had to use Stanford's letter once, but it helped.
Good. I had asked you about Truman Capote's, whether Truman's friend was really trans.
I don't know.
I know. But part of where I was going with that was Stanford wasn't always sure you were really trans.
Oh, yes, I know.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I was the first person that Stanford saw that came right out and said, I don't like guys. I'm not into guys. I like women. I'm a lesbian. And they, what? How can you be transgender and be a lesbian? This does not make sense. And they had so much problems with that, so many problems that even though I kept telling them the same thing month after month after month, year after year, they prolonged my life experience. That there's one of the requirements for surgery is that you go through a period of life experience when you are 24/7 in the gender of choice. So I told Stanford, particularly Dr. Fisk, who was the head psychiatrist, and he and I used to go around and around and around and around about this. He wanted me to have some sexual experience with guys. And I did not want that. I did not want that. I thought that was not, I didn't think that was appropriate. The normal life experience period was 1 year. They extended me to 2 years. I had to wait, I had to live without surgery for 2 years before they would give me a surgery date. And even then, they wouldn't give me that date for surgery until I had a personal interview with Harry Benjamin. So they got Harry to fly from New York to San Francisco to interview me and give me his blessing before they give me a date for my surgery. Now, basically, Harry just He and I had a very nice chat for about an hour. And from what he told me, was that he was basically going to write a letter to Donald and say, why are you sitting on this lady? She's obviously transgender. She needs her surgery. You're being mean to her. And then, so Harry Benjamin's letter came, and I still didn't get my date for my surgery. So I used to call my parents like once a week and just to talk, and on Sundays. And one Sunday I was complaining to my mom about, I don't know if they're ever going to give me a date for my surgery. I saw Harry Benjamin, he gave his approval, and I've waited 2 years and they're still not giving me a date for my surgery. And I don't know what to do now. It's like I'm in limbo. And my mom said that she would take care of it. And my mom, I met her at the door of the Department of Plastic Surgery. And I took her in and introduced her to the coordinator of the monthly meetings. And I introduced her to Donald Laub. And she had a meeting with Dr. Laub. And the next week, I got a letter from Stanford giving me a date for my surgery. I don't know what she said to him, but I have a feeling she was only 5'2", but I have a feeling she read him the riot. Why are you doing this to my daughter?
That is such a great story. But and yet there was still one more hurdle that they required you to do.
Related. Oh yeah. Well, they required Rita and I to get a divorce. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, they required us to get a divorce. Because you obviously can't love someone of the same gender. That's
yeah. So
that was not so much the doctors, there was not even so much the psychiatrists. That was the lawyers that forced that rule. That rule was forced by the lawyers for the university and the University Medical Center. They were very worried about a spouse suing them for, I don't know, what do you call it when you take away their ability to have sex?
Alienation of affection.
Yeah, that's right. Alienation. There's no reason why there should be alienation. You could still love a person. That's silly. But they made Rita and I get a divorce. And we split up. We did it. She did it do it yourself. Huh?
I'm sorry. And the next thing I wanted to ask you is also going to be a little hard. I wanted to ask you about the surgery. You mentioned the lawyers got involved with requiring you to divorce. The lawyers also had something to do with where your surgery took place. Is that correct?
Yeah. They wouldn't allow the original surgery to take place at Stanford University Hospital. It had to be done at a local community hospital. So the county hospital for Palo Alto, Stanford, that was in San Mateo. That was Choke Community Hospital in San Mateo, and that's where my surgery was done.
Because
It was the surgical team from Stanford, but they all had to go over to the community hospital to actually perform the surgeries.
Because they didn't want you in the Stanford hospital.
They didn't want you in the Stanford hospital. Now, if your surgery was, no matter where your surgery was performed, if it was botched for some reason, if there was an issue, a fistula, some kind of a tear, anything that required repairs, they would do the repairs at Stanford Hospital. But they wouldn't do the original surgery at Stanford Hospital.
Okay, I had another question. How confident were your surgeons in what they were about to do with you?
With me?
Yeah.
They were not confident at all, because I went in on, it was I think it was the last week in June of '74, and I got in there, and I'd had physicals. I had they'd examined me before, and I was a valid candidate for the surgery. And I got in the hospital, into Choke, and they started to prep me, and they took my blood pressure, and it was sky high. It was like over 170 or something. And they were quite worried, and they canceled my surgery. And I didn't get another date until September 23rd. So my anniversary was just 3 days ago. They had me go through all kinds of tests trying to figure out why I had high blood pressure. I've been on high blood pressure medicine ever since. They gave me about a 50% chance.
A 50% chance of what?
Of living through the surgery. And
was that because of your blood pressure, or was that
because of my blood pressure?
Okay. Okay.
Without medication, which they didn't want to give me during the period of the surgery, I don't know if, I think it's still done this way, but back then, when, for some reason, when you were going to have SRS or GRS, if you're going to have reassignment surgery, they take you off of your hormones for typically 2 or 3 weeks before your surgery. They wanted to take me off my blood pressure medicine for that period of time too. They basically wanted to take me off of all medication prior to my surgery. And that's what we did. I basically told them, look, you have to give me my surgery. If you don't give me my surgery, your 50% doesn't make any difference, because I'm going to commit suicide by the time I'm 30. I'm not going to make it. So if I'm not going to make it, if you don't give me the surgery, you might as well do it. And that was 46 years ago.
Yeah. Showed them, didn't you? Was it Dr. Laub who did your surgery?
Ah, now you're getting into the training end of it. You really need to read Dr. Laub's book. He has a book that came out last year that's really fascinating because he started a lot of medical units going down to Latin America and South America and stuff. And Dr. Laub had very specific ideas, unique ideas about how to train plastic surgeons. He was very specific to his field of plastic surgery. He thought that it was something that it was an area that lent itself to apprenticeship. And it was apprenticeships that were appropriate. So he would assign each patient to a specific student surgeon. And that student surgeon would design our surgery. And Donald liked the students to try and improve the surgery in some way, whether it was in terms of the time it took to do it, or the ease of healing, or the end results visually. He liked some improvement in terms of the surgeon's point of view. So no, Donald didn't conduct my surgery. He was supposedly in the room, but I never saw him. But then by the time I got in that room, I was asleep. So I don't know. I assume he was there, but.
But just to make sure I understand, your surgery was unique because it was a trial.
Oh, every surgery conducted by Stanford was a trial. It was a medical training procedure.
Got it. Got it. I think I'd like to open it now to our viewers and see if you all have any questions you'd like to ask Jen at this point, because we got through, well, the first third of your life. Can you put any questions in the chat? If you don't come up with questions, I've got some more for her. While we're waiting, Jen, tell me about the recovery room that they put you in after your surgery.
The transgender ward for Choate Hospital was in the basement, right next to the jail ward. And my dad was not too appreciative of that. He was not a happy camper. they brought me, my mom and dad brought me flowers, and well, first off, they were the first parents that the nurses at CHOPE had ever seen down in the transgender ward. And they brought me flowers, they brought me roses. And Dad thought that bringing the nurses chocolates might get me better treatment. So he brought the nurses chocolates. Like every other day, he would bring up a box of chocolates to try and butter them up to, I don't know, to take care of me. He was not a happy camp. I was not a happy camper. He was not a happy camper. My surgery was shocking to me. I visited other girls that had gone through the surgery before me, thinking that I would prepare myself for, I mean, I knew there was a lot of pain coming, but I would prepare myself for the situation and things, but I did not realize the diversity of the surgical procedures. They were quite, some of them were quite unique, and mine was quite unique. When I woke up, I had casts around both knees, and I had a brace between those to keep my thighs at a 90-degree angle. My neovagina had its stent, which is a form, inside it, and then they sewn my labia shut to retain the stent inside my vagina for a period of about 8 days. And they'd never done this procedure before. It was a unique procedure, and they'd never tried it before. And they had no idea what was going to happen when they started cutting those stitches. But they assured me that I would feel no pain. Yeah, right. You can imagine your labia are sewn shut with a balloon inside with pressure, that when those stitches start to go, that they're going to, it was extremely painful, extremely painful. I think I heard doctors saying that they'd never heard people scream as loud as they did.
Can we take the one question that's in the chat right now?
I think I guess there's only one. Yeah, you have shown great resilience. What advice would you give to young people in regards to their own resilience and being true to themselves? I love the fact that transgendered teens are coming out more so that they can take advantage of T blockers to hold off their puberty and not be ravaged by testosterone. I mean, I'm just speaking male to female. I think it's so important to have testosterone blockers be available to kids before they hit puberty. I think that's Resilience. Um, I don't think you, I really don't think you have any choice.
Well, I do want to note that one of our viewers said that we need more parents like yours. And that's part of your story that I was so interested.
My parents passed away 25 years ago. I think my parents were quite unique. They were Christians with a small c. They did not believe in, they believed that love was the highest power. And all they could do was express their love for me. They were real special. I was so lucky in getting them to, in that they adopted me. I just fell into them.
Well, they're definitely, it's definitely great to hear about when they went to bat for you. And I do really like the picture of your mother with some of these very big male names.
Yeah.
That's really good. So we have another comment, and I will say that this is from someone who has worked with trans people for decades. I would wish that you would write your story so young folks can appreciate all the positive changes that have occurred in your lifetime. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I'm in the process of writing it. I've gotten through about to about age 28, and I'm 72 now, but there hasn't been that much occur crazy in my life since I've been 40. So, I mean, all the unique stuff in my life has basically been prior to my 40th birthday. So I'm hoping I can finish it maybe within the next year or 18 months. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. Have you got some, Gretchen, have you got some suggestions on what I should do with it once I've written it?
We'll see if there's any answers there. Michael, you said you had some questions.
I do. I have several questions, and I think that I'm not sure of the ages of who's on our call today, and I think that some of what you've shared is probably really alien to folks, right? Because we don't make people get divorced anymore before they have surgery. We don't make people wait for 2 years because we think that being lesbian is not a good thing. So I just, I'm curious about, now that you're so far removed from that time, which must have been really painful, what you think of the world that's changed in terms of trans people's access to services now.
I want to take a step back, okay? I think if things are more difficult for you, you tend to have more appreciation for the release of that difficulty, for the conquering of those issues, okay? I would tell you one thing And that is, it's a little funny, but about a year and a half after my surgery, I started getting really social. I started dancing at discos and going to gay bars and making friends in the lesbian community in Santa Cruz where I was living. And I fell into a group of women who would go up to the San Lorenzo River, which is the river that runs into Santa Cruz. And there was a beach on the edge of the San Leandro River that was a nude beach. And the most freeing thing after my surgery was going with them up to a nude beach, taking my clothes off and getting and just getting sun and feeling the freedom and of being with other women and just not having to have clothes, not having to be hidden, not having to be ashamed of my body. Just, I can't explain how good that felt. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's an answer to it, and I think there's no right or wrong answer to it, right? It's just such a different time, and it's just an amazing thing. And it's kind of, I think it would be impossible to say, well, what would it be like now?
I could not imagine waiting until now. I have friends that are just coming out to themselves in their 50s and 60s and 70s now on Elder TJ. I cannot imagine what they have lived through. That would be the unimaginable thing for me. That would have been impossible. I couldn't have done it.
I have two other questions if Loree will let me ask two other questions, and if you'll amuse me by answering them. I think a lot of people think of Elliot Blackstone as someone who's the bad guy, who is involved with Compton, and he had a bad rap. And so you've spoken about him really positively, and I'm just wondering if that was the experience of other people that had interactions with him.
I'm sorry, how did he get a bad rap?
Wasn't he involved with the Compton riots and
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. Then maybe I'm thinking about somebody else. Okay, so we raised the question.
He was San Francisco PD,
right.
Community Relations.
Yep. I'm going to have to go back and review my history then. So erase the question.
Let me know. I'm very interested in that.
Okay. The last question that I had for you, and I'll flip it back to Loree then, is I'm wondering if you have a cohort of people that came out in the same time frame that you came out, that went through Stanford at the same kind of time, that you've stayed connected with.
The short answer is no. The long answer is one person that we get together maybe every 10 or 15 years, and I haven't heard from her in probably 10. So, and that's Sandy Stone.
Can you share? I mean, I certainly know who Sandy Stone is, and I'm curious if you would share a little bit about that. Who she is, because many people may not know who she is.
Okay, she's become more out politically, and she's much more out than I am. This is about the most out thing that I've ever done in my life. Can't believe I'm doing this. Sandy was when I knew her living in Santa Cruz. She owned and ran a stereo repair place. And she was a DJ on the local public radio in Santa Cruz, KUSP. And I met her when we were both at going through Stanford. And she was working on her doctorate at UCSC, and she eventually got that, and she went into a lot of experiential art, performance art type things about gender. She let me tell you one experience. Here's something. When she had her shop working on stereo gear, she had been a recording engineer as a guy. She had worked as a recording engineer. I'm trying to remember. Several rather famous people. I had Sandy over for tea one afternoon and said, I want you to listen to this album. And it was Chris Williamson's The Changer and the Changed. And I sat her down and I had her listen to this album, and her response when we finished it was, how do I get a hold of these women? This needs to be fixed. There are things that are wrong with it that need to be corrected because it is incredible music, but it's not engineered correctly. And she went on to re-engineer it, to get a hold of the women at Olivia, to become one of their engineers, to fix that album. And if you go in and try and buy Changer and the Change to this day, you'll get Sandy's version. You won't get the old original version. So one of the things that Sandy did was take the transgender issue. It became a real issue in the feminist lesbian community. And Sandy brought that to a head, not by being a bad guy, just by being herself. I don't understand. I mean, those women who think that male to female transgender people are some kind of male fifth column or male spies trying to subvert it makes no sense to me. I don't understand those people. I don't have the patience to argue with them. I don't, okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael, I can't give you more verbiage than that. That's.
Jen, I had never heard that you were the one that introduced Sandy Stone to Olivia.
I didn't introduce her to Olivia. I introduced her to Chris Williamson's album.
Yes. But
she had to go, she took the step of finding out about Olivia and contacting them and saying, this is what needs to be changed.
But you were the link.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
That's really great. That's really wonderful. We have come to the end of our time. Is there any last word you want to have?
No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Well, we really want to thank you for doing this. That you can consider this a trial practice for when you do your book tour.
I'm not sure about that.
And Gretchen did make a recommendation on a publisher, which I've written down in case you.
Yeah, do you know anything about them?
I know they're very good, so we'll follow that some more. Michael, do you want to do a closeout?
Sure. So first of all, I mean, I think as Loree just said, I mean, thank you, Jen, for being here and for sharing so much of your story. And I know there's much more. And I agree that a book would be fantastic. And I look forward to reading it whenever you get it done. And I see little snippets of it every once in a while. So it's really beautiful. So thank you for being brave and bold and coming out. I hear that, you know, that's not your normal thing. So I really appreciate that. And thank you everybody that's here and listening and being part of today, which is a really good way to spend your Saturday afternoon, I think. So I appreciate everybody being here. Thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your afternoon.